"I can replace you in a day," said the Duke. "Try," she replied as she walked away. Westmere Park had never looked finer. The morning light poured through the tall windows of the Duke's study, catching on polished mahogany and illuminating the stack of ledgers Margery Seymour had spent the better part of the night organizing. She had barely slept. 3 hours, perhaps 4. But she never required much rest when the annual spring ball loomed so near. 15 days. Not nearly enough time for all that needed doing, but she would manage it. She always did. The door opened without ceremony. Leopold Thornhill, Duke of Westmere, entered with the sort of careless confidence that came from owning half of Derbyshire. His cravat was loosened. He must have already been at the brandy, though it was scarcely past 9, and there was ink on his right cuff. Margery noticed such things. She had made it her business to notice everything about Westmere Park for the past 5 years, from the faulty hinge on the scullery door to the particular way His Grace preferred his correspondence arranged. Miss Seymour. He did not look at her as he crossed to his desk. "I require the guest list for the ball." "It is there, Your Grace." She gestured to the leather folder she had placed on the corner of his desk not 20 minutes prior, along with the revised menu, the seating arrangements, and the schedule of entertainments. He flipped the folder open, barely glancing at its contents. "This will not do." Margery's jaw tightened. "I beg your pardon?" "The Havertons." He tapped the list with one finger. "They are not invited. The Havertons have attended every spring ball at Westmere for the past 30 years, Your Grace. Your late father is dead." Leopold's voice was flat. "I am the Duke now. The Havertons bore me. They will not be invited." She could feel the familiar heat rising in her chest, the sort that came from swallowing words that ought to be spoken. "Very well. Shall I inform them by post, or would you prefer to deliver the insult in person?" His gaze finally lifted to hers, cold, gray. "You forget yourself, Miss Seymour." "I forget nothing, Your Grace." The words came out sharper than she had intended, least of all my position. "But if you wish to alienate one of the oldest families in the county mere days before the most important social event of the season, I cannot stop you." The clock on the mantelpiece ticked. Once. Twice. Leopold set the folder down with deliberate care. "You question my decisions a great deal for someone in your position." "My position is to ensure this household runs smoothly, which includes preventing you from making rash choices that will reflect poorly on Westmere." "Rash?" A muscle worked in his jaw. "I have given the matter considerable thought." "You have given it none at all." Margery stood, her hands flat against the desk. The ink had left a small stain on the blotter. She would need to see to that later. "You woke this morning in poor temper, saw the Havertons' name, and decided to remove them. That is not consideration, Your Grace. That is caprice." For a long moment he simply stared at her. The study smelled of old leather and the faint trace of bergamot from his shaving soap. Somewhere below, a maid was singing, badly, as she swept the hall. "You are quite certain of my thoughts, then?" "I have managed this household for 5 years, Your Grace. I know when a decision is well-reasoned and when it is not." His laugh was short and humorless. "How fortunate I am to have such an omniscient housekeeper." "Governess General," Margery corrected. "Your father granted me the title when I reorganized the entire staff structure and saved Westmere from financial ruin after the flood. A title you never cease reminding me of, because you never cease treating me as though I am replaceable." The word hung between them like smoke. Leopold straightened, his expression shifting to something harder. "Replaceable." "You dismiss my counsel at every turn. You make changes without consulting me. You behave as though this estate runs itself, or worse, as though your mere presence is sufficient to keep it functioning." "I am the Duke of Westmere," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This estate is mine, and it would collapse within a fortnight without me." She had not meant to say it, but there it was, 5 years of biting her tongue, of watching him take credit for her work, of being invisible except when he required something. The words could not be unsaid. Leopold's eyes narrowed. "You think yourself indispensable." "I know I am." "Then you are a fool." He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them until she could smell the brandy on his breath. No one is indispensable, Miss Seymour, least of all a governess general with delusions of grandeur. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the desk harder. I have no delusions, Your Grace. I have the account books, the staff schedules, the contracts with every tradesman and supplier in 3 counties. I have the knowledge of how this household operates, knowledge you do not possess because you have never bothered to learn it. I do not need to learn it. His voice was ice. That is what I employ you for. Then you should listen when I speak. I should replace you with someone who knows her place. The clock ticked. A coal shifted in the grate. Then do so, Margery said quietly. Replace me. Leopold's expression flickered, surprise perhaps, or irritation that she had not backed down. Perhaps I shall. How long do you imagine it will take? She released the desk, straightening to her full height. She was not tall, barely reached his shoulder, but she held his gaze without flinching. A week, a month. I could replace you in a day. The certainty in his voice was what did it, the absolute conviction that she was nothing, that her 5 years of labor, of waking at dawn and working past midnight, of knowing every servant's name and every room's peculiarities, of loving this estate as though it were her own, meant nothing at all. Try, Margery said. Leopold blinked. I beg your pardon. Try. She reached for the desk drawer, withdrew the heavy ring of keys she carried everywhere, and set them on the leather blotter with a dull clink. Replace me in a day, Your Grace. I should very much like to see you manage it. His hand moved as though to push the keys back towards her, but she stepped away. Miss Seymour, you have made your position clear. Her voice was steady now, emptied of anger. I am replaceable. The work I do is inconsequential. Very well. I accept your assessment. She moved towards the door, each step measured and deliberate. I shall be gone by this evening. You are being absurd. She paused at the threshold, glancing back over her shoulder. Leopold stood by the desk, the keys still gleaming between them like a challenge neither had meant to issue. Am I? Margery allowed herself a small, bitter smile. I suppose we shall discover the truth of it soon enough, Your Grace. Good day. She left the door open behind her. By sunset, Westmere Park was already unraveling. Leopold stood at the window of his study, watching Margery's hired carriage disappear down the long drive towards the village. She had packed quickly. He would grant her that. 2 trunks and a leather case, carried by a footman who had looked at Leopold with something distressingly close to accusation. She's really leaving, then? He turned. His cousin, Cornelius Fairfax, lounged in the doorway, a glass of port in hand despite the early hour. Cornelius made a habit of arriving at Westmere unannounced and treating the place as his personal club. Normally, Leopold tolerated it. Today, he found it grating. Miss Seymour has tendered her resignation, Leopold said stiffly. Resignation. Cornelius laughed. Is that what we're calling it? I was in the hall when she came down the stairs. Face like thunder, keys in hand. Looked more like a general abandoning a lost battle. She was impertinent. She was right. Leopold's gaze snapped back to his cousin. I beg your pardon? Cornelius sauntered into the room, settling into the chair Margery had occupied that morning. It still held a faint indentation where she had sat. You told her you could replace her in a day. That was monumentally stupid, Leo. I am the Duke of Westmere. I do not require a housekeeper's permission to... She's not a housekeeper. She's the only reason this estate hasn't fallen apart since your father died. Cornelius took a long drink. Do you even know how many staff Westmere employs? Leopold frowned. 20? 30? 47, not including the groundskeepers and stable hands. Cornelius gestured with his glass. And Miss Seymour knows every one of them by name, knows their families, their wages, their particular skills. When was the last time you spoke to any of them? I do not need to speak to them. That is what... He stopped. What Miss Seymour was for, Cornelius finished. Past tense. She's gone now, cousin. What precisely do you intend to do about it? Leopold moved to his desk, shoving aside the stack of ledgers Margery had left. The topmost one fell open, revealing columns of figures in her precise, elegant hand. Expenditures for the month. Wages, repairs to the north wing, orders for the spring planting. He recognized none of it. I shall manage. With what, charm? Cornelius snorted. You barely know where the kitchens are located. I know perfectly well where the kitchens are. Then you know Cook is threatening to leave because the new coal supplier keeps delivering short weight, and Miss Seymour was the only one who could convince him to honor his contract? You know the laundered linens are stored in the third-floor closet that floods every time it rains, and she personally oversaw moving them before the last storm. You know the Haverton's daughter is betrothed to Lord Ashcroft's son, and removing them from the guest list will insult half the county. Leopold said nothing. Cornelius stood, setting his glass on the desk with more force than necessary. You don't know any of it, Leo, because you never paid attention. You inherited a functioning estate and assumed it would simply continue functioning without effort. Well, now you'll discover what effort actually entails. The word stung more than Leopold cared to admit. He had not thought, had not allowed himself to think, about what Margery actually did beyond fetching ledgers and arranging flowers. It had seemed so simple when she did it. Wake, issue orders, ensure things were done. How difficult could it be? She cannot be so essential as all that. Cornelius was already at the door. Then prove it, cousin. Run Westmere for a day without her. If you succeed, I shall personally apologize on your behalf. If you fail— He paused. Well, I dare say she shall hear of it in the village. They always do. He left. The door clicked shut. Leopold stood alone in the study as the light faded outside. The keys Margery had left glinted on the desk. He picked them up, feeling their weight. There were at least 30 keys on the ring, each one labeled in Margery's neat hand. East Wing Stores, Wine Cellar, Linen Closet, Silver Vault. He had not known Westmere had a silver vault. Somewhere below, a bell rang. The dinner bell, he supposed, though he had never paid much mind to which bell meant what. He should go down, speak to Cook, ensure the meals were still being prepared. But as he descended the main staircase, he realized he could not remember Cook's name. The dining room was colder than usual. Leopold ate alone, as he always did when Cornelius was not staying for supper. The roast was overdone, the potatoes underdone, and the wine, when he finally managed to flag down a passing footman to pour it, was the wrong vintage entirely. Apologies, Your Grace, the footman mumbled. He was young, with spots on his chin. Miss Seymour usually tells us which wine to serve. I am perfectly capable of selecting my own wine. Yes, Your Grace. But the boy looked doubtful as he scurried back towards the kitchens. Leopold stared at the graying meat on his plate. In truth, he had not selected the wine. He had simply pointed to a bottle and assumed it would be correct. Miss Seymour always knew which wine paired with which course. He had never asked how she knew. He had simply assumed. The thought trailed off uncomfortably. After supper, he retreated to his study, intending to review the ledgers. But Margery's handwriting was infuriatingly difficult to decipher in the candlelight, and the figures swam together until he could make no sense of them. Expenditures and income, debts and credits, contracts with names he did not recognize for goods he had never considered. How much coal did Westmere use in a month? He had no idea. How many loaves of bread did the kitchens require each week? No idea. Where did the staff take their wages? From whom? When? He pushed the ledgers away, a headache building behind his eyes. This was absurd. He was a duke. He had managed his investments in London with perfect competence. He had overseen the renovation of his townhouse in Mayfair. He was not some helpless fool. But when he tried to sleep that night, he kept thinking of Margery's face as she had walked out. Not angry, not upset. Simply empty. As though she had finally stopped expecting anything from him at all. The thought kept him awake until dawn. The first disaster arrived with breakfast. Your Grace. The cook, he still could not remember her name, stood in the doorway of the breakfast room, wringing her hands. There's been a situation. Leopold set down his coffee. What manner of situation? The morning delivery, Your Grace. The baker's boy says we haven't paid for the last month's bread, and he won't leave today's order until we settle the account. That's absurd. Of course we've paid for the bread. Miss Seymour handled all the household accounts, Your Grace. The cook's voice was strained. She kept the records in the estate office. The baker says he's been asking for payment for weeks, but... She trailed off. Leopold felt heat creep up his neck. How much is owed? 17 pounds, Your Grace. 17 pounds. He stood so abruptly, his chair scraped across the floor. For bread. It's a large household, Your Grace. And Miss Seymour always ordered extra for the servants' hall. Leopold strode past her, heading for the estate office. It was a small room off the main hall. He had been inside perhaps twice in his life. The door was locked. He fumbled with the key ring Margery had left, trying 3 different keys before one finally turned. Inside, the office was meticulously organized. Files lined the shelves, each one labeled in Margery's hand. Tradesmen, correspondence, staff records, repairs. The desk held neat stacks of papers, a ledger, and a small tin of tea that had gone cold in the pot. Leopold opened the ledger labeled Household Expenditures. The baker's account was there clear as day, 17 pounds outstanding, due 2 weeks prior. Margery must have paid it from the household funds. Except... He flipped back further. There were dozens of entries in her hand. Payments to the butcher, the coal merchant, the candle maker. Small amounts, paid regularly. All in her precise, careful script. She had been managing everything, every last detail, and he had never even noticed. The door behind him opened. A maid, Mary, Martha, peeked in nervously. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Mrs. Holloway says the laundered linens need sorting, and she don't know where they go. Miss Seymour always directed that. Tell Mrs. Holloway to sort them herself. She says she don't know which linens go to which rooms, Your Grace. Then tell her to... Leopold stopped. He did not know which linens went where either. Tell her I shall be along presently. The maid bobbed a curtsy and fled. Leopold sank into Margery's chair. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes in the air. Everything in this room was orderly, precise, under control. Everything outside it was falling apart. He had not believed her. When she said the estate would collapse without her, he had thought it hyperbole, pride speaking. But it had been less than 24 hours, and already he could feel the cracks forming. No one knew what to do. No one knew what was needed. They had all relied on her, just as he had. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 9. One day, he had said, he could replace her in one day. The words felt like ash in his mouth. By the 3rd morning, Leopold had stopped pretending he was managing. The household had not collapsed, not entirely, but it was limping along like a wounded animal. Meals appeared at odd hours. The fires were lit too late, or not at all. 3 separate tradesmen had arrived demanding payment for overdue accounts. The head gardener had quit in a fury after no one could locate the orders for spring bulbs. And somewhere in the east wing, there was a leak that no one seemed able to find, despite the ceiling dripping steadily into a bucket that needed emptying every 2 hours. Leopold sat at his desk, staring at the mountain of correspondence that had accumulated. Bills, invitations, complaints. He had attempted to sort through them the previous evening and given up after an hour. Margery's system made sense when she explained it. But without her annotations, it was simply paper. Endless, incomprehensible paper. A knock at the door made him look up. Cornelius entered without waiting for permission, as usual, but this time his expression held something other than amusement. You have a visitor. Leopold's chest tightened. If it is another tradesman demanding payment, it's not a tradesman. Cornelius stepped aside, and Leopold's breath caught. Margery stood in the doorway. She looked different somehow. Smaller, perhaps, though that made no sense. She was the same height she had always been, but without the keys at her waist and the purposeful set to her shoulders, she seemed diminished. Her traveling cloak was damp at the hem. It must have rained during her journey from the village. Miss Seymour. Leopold rose, suddenly aware of how disheveled he must appear. He had not shaved properly in 2 days. His cravat was tied poorly. There was ink on his waistcoat. I did not expect, that is, I had not thought, that I would return. She stepped into the room and Cornelius quietly withdrew, closing the door behind him. Neither did I, Your Grace. Her voice was calm, too calm. The sort of calm that came from making a difficult decision and committing to it regardless of the cost. Leopold gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please, sit. She did not sit. Instead, she moved to the window, gazing out at the grounds. The gardens needed tending. That was apparent even from here. Weeds were already creeping into the rose beds. I have spent the past 3 days in the village, Margery said quietly. Taking the air, considering my prospects. I received a letter from Lord Harcourt. He requires a housekeeper for his estate in Kent. The position pays well, and he assures me the household is small and manageable. Kent. The word felt like a stone in Leopold's throat. That is quite far from Derbyshire. Indeed. Which is precisely why I am considering it. She turned to face him, her hands clasped before her. But before I accept, I wish to speak with you, to clarify certain matters. Miss Seymour, I must apologize. No. The word was sharp. I do not require your apology, Your Grace. I require your honesty. He had never seen her like this. In 5 years, Margery had been deferential, efficient, occasionally exasperated, but never this direct. It was unsettling, and, he realized with some surprise, rather impressive. Very well, he said slowly. Ask what you wish. Can you manage Westmere without me? The question hung between them like a blade. Leopold wanted to say yes, wanted to prove that he was not the useless aristocrat she clearly thought him, but the past 3 days had stripped away any illusions he might have held. No, he admitted, I cannot. She did not smile, did not look triumphant. If anything, she appeared sad. Why did you never learn? Your father managed this estate for 40 years. He knew every tenant, every field, every servant. Yet you. I was not meant to inherit so soon. The words came out more defensive than he had intended. Father was strong, healthy. I thought I had years to learn from him. And then the fever came and he was gone in a week and I... He stopped, rubbing a hand across his face. I have made a terrible mess of things. Yes, Margery said simply. You have. The bluntness of it stung, but he could not argue. The evidence was everywhere, in the bills piled on his desk, in the staff's worried faces, in the general air of barely controlled chaos that had overtaken Westmere. You were right, he continued, forcing himself to meet her gaze, about all of it. I did not listen. I did not see what you did. I treated you as though you were invisible. And I am sorry. Margery was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a bird called. The clock ticked. I do not want your apology, Your Grace. I want change. Change? She moved to the desk, pulling a folded paper from the pocket of her cloak. If I am to return to Westmere, and I have not yet decided that I shall, these are my conditions. Leopold took the paper, unfolding it. Her handwriting was precise as always, but the content made his eyebrows rise. Terms of employment for Miss Margery Seymour, Governess General of Westmere Park. Salary to be tripled, paid quarterly without delay. Full authority over all household expenditures below £50. Private chambers in the East Wing, not the servants' quarters. Direct access to the Duke for all matters concerning the estate. Public acknowledgement of her position and contributions. No dismissal without 6 months' notice and severance pay. Tripled? Leopold looked up. Miss Seymour, this is fair. Her chin lifted. You admitted yourself that you cannot manage without me. And if I am to be indispensable, Your Grace, then I require compensation befitting that status, as well as respect. The last word landed like a blow. Respect. He had not given her that, had he? For 5 years she had worked tirelessly, and he had taken it all for granted, had assumed she would simply continue indefinitely, invisible and uncomplaining. You are correct, he said quietly. About all of it. I accept your terms. Margery blinked. You accept? Did you expect me to refuse? I expected you to negotiate, to balk at the salary, at minimum. She frowned, clearly thrown off balance. You agreed rather quickly, Your Grace. Because I am not a complete fool, Miss Seymour, despite evidence to the contrary. He set the paper down, smoothing it with one hand. You have proven your worth beyond any doubt. I should be grateful you are willing to return at all. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I want one more thing. Name it. Your trust. The words were quiet but firm. If I return, you must listen when I speak. Consider my counsel. Stop making decisions without consulting me. I cannot do my work if you undermine me at every turn. Leopold felt something shift in his chest. It was not anger this time. It was something closer to shame. You have my word. Words are cheap, Your Grace. Then I shall prove it through action. He stood moving around the desk until only a few feet separated them. This close he could see the faint shadows beneath her eyes. She had not slept well in the village, he realized. Perhaps she had been worrying about Westmere despite herself. I have been arrogant and foolish. I treated you poorly. But if you return, Miss Seymour, I swear to you, it will be different. She held his gaze, searching for something. Truth, perhaps, or sincerity. Finally, she nodded. Very well, I shall return. Relief flooded through him, so intense it was almost dizzying. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Your Grace. She moved past him towards the door, then paused at the threshold. The spring ball is in 12 days. If we are to salvage it, we have a great deal of work ahead of us. We? She glanced back, and for the first time since she had arrived, there was the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. You did say you wished to learn, did you not? Then I shall teach you, starting tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. 6? Leopold's voice rose slightly. In the morning? The household does not pause for your comfort, Your Grace. If you wish to understand how Westmere functions, you must be present when the work begins. She pulled open the door. Wear old clothes. We shall be inspecting the kitchens first. And then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Leopold stood alone in the study, staring at the paper she had left behind. The terms were written in her precise hand, each line clear and unyielding. He had agreed to all of it, and stranger still, he did not regret it. For the first time in 3 days, Westmere felt like it might not collapse after all. The fire crackled behind him. Rain began to patter against the windows. He had a great deal to learn. Over the following 10 days, a new rhythm emerged at Westmere Park. 6 o'clock arrived with brutal efficiency. Leopold descended to the kitchens in his oldest coat, the one he wore for riding, already stained with mud from a previous season. He had not been to the kitchens in years, perhaps ever. The narrow servants' staircase was unfamiliar territory, and he took a wrong turn twice before finding the right corridor. Margery was already there, speaking with cook in low, efficient tones. She glanced up when Leopold entered, her expression unreadable. Your Grace. Punctual. That is encouraging. I gave my word. So you did. She turned back to cook, Mrs. Cavendish. He had finally learned the previous evening after checking the household ledger. We shall continue this discussion later, Mrs. Cavendish. For now, proceed as we discussed. Mrs. Cavendish bobbed a curtsy and returned to her work. The kitchen was already alive with activity despite the early hour. Scullery maids scrubbed pots. A boy turned the spit. The scent of baking bread filled the air, warm and yeasty. Margery moved to the large table in the center of the room, where several ledgers lay open. The household consumes approximately 40 loaves of bread per week, she said without preamble. 60 during the season, when guests are frequent. The cost is covered by the monthly baker's account, which must be settled on the first of each month to maintain good relations. Leopold nodded, though his head was already spinning. 40 loaves, 60. First of the month. Additionally, Margery continued, we require 12 pounds of butter weekly, 20 of sugar, 30 of flour for Mrs. Cavendish's personal use in cooking, tea, Coffee and chocolate are purchased quarterly from a merchant in Derby. Salt, pepper, and other spices are ordered separately. How do you remember all of this? She looked at him as though the question made no sense. Because it is my responsibility to remember, Your Grace. If I do not know what the household requires, how can I ensure it is provided? It seemed so obvious when she said it like that. Yet Leopold had never considered the sheer volume of goods required to keep Westmere running. Food appeared on his plate. Fires burned in the grates. Sheets were clean. He had assumed it all simply happened. What else? He asked. Margery's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised perhaps that he was genuinely asking. Come with me. She led him through the kitchens, pointing out the larders where preserved goods were stored, the coal cellar where fuel was kept, the scullery where dishes were washed. Every room had its purpose. Every person had their role. This is Thomas, Margery said, stopping beside a young man hauling buckets of water. He rises at 5 each morning to ensure there is hot water available for the household. He also tends the kitchen fires and assists with heavy lifting. Thomas looked terrified to be addressed by the Duke. Leopold offered what he hoped was an encouraging nod. I am much obliged for your work, Thomas. The boy nearly dropped his bucket. Your Grace, thank you, Your Grace. They continued on. Margery introduced him to the scullery maids, the kitchen maids, the boot boy, the lamp boy. Names and faces blurred together, but Leopold forced himself to pay attention. These people worked for him. They kept his household running. The least he could do was know who they were. By the time they returned to the kitchens, Mrs. Cavendish had laid out breakfast on the servants' table. Bread, butter, cold ham, and tea. Margery poured 2 cups without asking. You will take breakfast here this morning, she said, pushing a cup towards him. The servants eat at 6:30. It is useful to understand their schedule. Leopold glanced around the kitchen. Several of the staff were watching him with barely concealed shock. A duke, eating in the servants' hall. It was unheard of. But Margery had already sat down, and he would not insult her by refusing. The bread was fresh. The tea was hot. And for the first time since his father's death, Leopold began to understand what it meant to truly know one's own household. Each morning, Leopold rose at 6 and met Margery in whatever part of the household required attention. One day it was the linens. He learned there were 4 different types of sheets, each reserved for specific rooms. Another day it was the wine cellar, where Margery explained the difference between the wines for everyday consumption and those reserved for important guests. She did not coddle him. If he made an error, she corrected it immediately. If he forgot something, she made him look it up in the ledgers himself. It was exhausting and occasionally humiliating, but Leopold found himself enjoying it, not the work itself perhaps, but the learning. The gradual sense of competence that came from understanding something he had previously ignored. And Margery. He found himself paying attention to her in ways he never had before. The way she always checked the kitchens first, ensuring the staff had what they needed before addressing anything else. The way she knew precisely which servants were struggling and offered assistance without making them feel inadequate. The way she moved through Westmere as though it were not just her workplace but her home. One afternoon, Leopold found her in the estate office, bent over a stack of correspondence. The light from the window caught in her hair. Brown, he had always thought, but in the sunlight it held threads of auburn and gold. Miss Seymour. She looked up, pushing a loose strand behind her ear. There was ink on her fingers. Your Grace, I did not hear you approach. I wished to discuss the seating arrangements for the ball. He moved closer, careful not to disturb the carefully organized papers. You mentioned the Ashcrofts should be seated near the Havertons. Lord Ashcroft is betrothed to Miss Haverton. It would be wise to acknowledge the connection. She pulled out the seating chart, a complex diagram that made Leopold's head ache just looking at it. I have placed them here, near the center, close enough to the head table to show respect, but not so close as to suggest undue favor. How do you determine such things? Years of observation, Your Grace, and a great deal of trial and error. She smiled faintly. The first ball I organized at Westmere, I seated Lord Pemberton next to the widow of the man who had cuckolded him. The evening did not go well. Leopold found himself smiling in return. I imagine not. Your father was furious. He nearly dismissed me on the spot. Her expression softened. But he gave me another chance. He said everyone deserves the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. He was a good man. He was. And he loved this estate deeply. Margery's gaze drifted to the window, where the grounds of Westmere stretched out in the afternoon light. I think that is what he tried to teach me, that Westmere is not simply a house. It is a home. For you, for the staff, for the tenants who depend on it. Everything we do here matters. Leopold had never heard her speak like this. In 5 years, their conversations had been entirely practical. Tasks and schedules and accounts. But now, standing in the quiet of the estate office with sunlight pooling on the floor, he realized how little he actually knew about her. "Why did you come to Westmere?" he asked. 5 years ago. You must have had other opportunities." Margery hesitated. "My father was a steward for an estate in Yorkshire. I grew up learning the work. When he died, I needed employment, and your father offered me the position." She met his gaze. "He saw something in me that others did not, Your Grace. He believed I could do the work. I have spent every day since trying to prove him right. You succeeded." "Did I?" Her voice was quiet. "You thought me replaceable in a day." Guilt twisted in Leopold's chest. "I was wrong, profoundly, inexcusably wrong." "Yes, you were." But there was no anger in her tone, only a weary sort of acceptance. "I do not tell you this for an apology, Your Grace. I tell you because I want you to understand. Westmere is not simply my employment. It is." She trailed off, searching for words. "It is the only home I have." Something shifted in that moment. Some understanding passed between them that Leopold could not quite name. He had thought of Margery as a servant, as staff, as a necessary function of the household. But she was none of those things. She was the heart of Westmere, the person who had kept it alive when he had been too blind to see. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for returning, for teaching me, for not giving up on this place. I did not do it for you, Your Grace. I know. You did it for Westmere." He paused. "But I am grateful nonetheless." She nodded, then returned her attention to the seating chart. But as Leopold left the office, he glanced back once. Margery was still bent over her work, the afternoon light gilding her profile. He found himself wishing he had said more, but the words remained stuck in his throat, unspoken. The first true shift came 3 days before the ball. Leopold was in the library, reviewing the household accounts under Margery's supervision, when one of the stable boys burst through the door. "Your Grace, Miss Seymour!" The boy was breathless, eyes wide with panic. "It's the carriage horses. One's thrown a shoe and the other's gone lame. We can't pull the carriage to collect the musicians from the village tomorrow." Margery was on her feet immediately. "Which horse?" "Apollo, miss, the big gray." She was already moving towards the door, but Leopold caught her arm. "Wait, I shall handle this." She looked at him with open surprise. "Your Grace, you have taught me a great deal these past weeks, Miss Seymour. But I do know something of horses." He turned to the stable boy. "Fetch the farrier at once. Tell him His Grace requires his immediate attendance. I shall be at the stables directly." The boy bolted. Margery remained standing, uncertainty flickering across her face. "The musicians must arrive by tomorrow evening. If the carriage cannot be readied, then I shall ride to the village myself and arrange alternative transport." Leopold pulled on his coat. "You have managed 1,000 crises alone, Miss Seymour. Allow me to manage this one." He left before she could protest. At the stables, he found Apollo indeed limping badly, the horse's left forelegs swollen. The farrier arrived within the hour and confirmed the shoe had been improperly fitted the previous week. "I can have him right by tomorrow, Your Grace," the farrier said, "but he'll need rest after. No pulling carriages for a sennight minimum." Leopold nodded. "See to it. In the meantime, I shall arrange alternate transport for the musicians." He rode to the village himself, arriving at the inn where the musicians were staying. The proprietor was initially skeptical that the Duke of Westmere had appeared personally, but Leopold's signet ring settled the matter. Within the hour, he had arranged for 2 smaller carts to transport the musicians and their instruments to Westmere the following day. When he returned to the estate, evening had fallen. The house glowed with lamplight. Margery met him in the front hall, her expression carefully neutral. "The musicians will arrive tomorrow as planned. I have arranged 2 carts." He pulled off his riding gloves. "Apollo is being treated and should recover fully, but he requires rest, so we shall need to adjust the carriage schedule for the next week." For a long moment, Margery simply stared at him. Then, softly, "You did well, Your Grace." The approval in her voice sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. "I had an excellent teacher. Nevertheless, you acted quickly and competently. I am." She paused, choosing her words. "I am impressed." Leopold had never particularly cared for others' approval. He was a duke, his worth was inherent. But hearing those words from Margery, knowing they were genuine, meant more than he expected. "I should like to help more," he said. "With the ball, with the estate. You need not carry the burden alone, Miss Seymour." She studied him for a long moment as though seeing something she had not noticed before. "Very well, Your Grace. Tomorrow we shall review the final preparations together." "Together," Leopold repeated. Something passed between them. A shift. A recognition. When Margery turned towards the estate office, Leopold found himself watching her go. The lamp she carried threw shadows along the walls. He stood in the empty hall long after she had gone. 2 days before the spring ball, the morning dawned gray and cold. Leopold woke before the servant's bell, his mind already running through the 1,000 tasks that required completion before the ball tomorrow evening. Flowers, music, food, guest arrangements. He had reviewed it all with Margery the previous night, her calm efficiency steadying his nerves. But when he descended to the estate office at 6, expecting to find her already at work, the room was empty. Odd. Margery was never late. He checked the kitchens. Mrs. Pemberton had not seen her. The library, the drawing rooms, the servants' hall. No one had seen Miss Seymour since the previous evening. Unease prickled at the back of Leopold's neck. He took the stairs to the east wing 2 at a time, arriving at Margery's chambers slightly breathless. When he knocked, there was no answer. "Miss Seymour?" He tried the door. Locked. "Margery?" A faint sound from within, something between a cough and a gasp. Leopold's blood went cold. "Margery, open the door." "I am. Quite well, Your Grace." Her voice was weak, strained. "I shall be down presently. Open the door, now." Silence. Then the scrape of a bolt being drawn back. The door opened a crack. Margery stood in the gap, still in her nightgown and wrapper, her face flushed with fever. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I overslept. I shall dress and—" She swayed. Leopold caught her before she fell, pushing the door fully open and guiding her back to the narrow bed in the corner. "You are ill." "I am perfectly—" A coughing fit cut off her protest. When it subsided, she lay back against the pillows, breathing hard. "It is nothing. A slight cold." Leopold pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. "Burning. You are fevered. When did this start?" "Yesterday evening, but truly, it is nothing." She tried to sit up, but another cough seized her. "The ball, there is so much to do." "The ball will manage." Leopold pushed her gently but firmly back down. "You will not." "Your Grace, I must—" "You must rest." He looked around the small room, taking in the sparse furnishings. A bed, a washstand, a single chair. This was where Margery had lived for 5 years. In a room barely larger than a closet. Guilt twisted in his gut. "I shall send for the physician." "There is no need." "There is every need." He moved to the door, then paused. "Have you eaten?" Margery looked away. "I was not hungry." Of course she had not eaten. She had probably worked through supper, ensuring every last detail for the ball was perfect. Leopold swore under his breath. "I shall have Mrs. Pemberton send up broth and tea. You will eat, and you will rest. That is an order, Miss Seymour." "You cannot order me to." I am the Duke of Westmere. I can order whatever I please. But his voice gentled. Please, Margery, let me help. She stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her fevered eyes. Then finally, she nodded. Leopold left the room and went directly to the kitchens. Mrs. Cavendish took one look at his face and immediately began preparing a tray. How bad is she? The cook asked quietly. Fevered, coughing. She has been working herself to exhaustion, and I... He stopped, rubbing a hand over his face. I did not notice. I should have noticed. Mrs. Cavendish's expression was kind but knowing. Miss Seymour does not ask for help, Your Grace. She never has, even when she ought to. That ends today. Leopold straightened. I need you to prepare simple meals for her. Broth, tea, soft bread, nothing heavy. And I want someone checking on her every 2 hours. Of course, Your Grace. I shall send for Dr. Hartwell immediately. In the meantime, he looked around at the bustling kitchen, at the staff preparing for the evening's feast. I need to know everything that still requires doing for the ball. Mrs. Cavendish blinked. Everything, Your Grace. Everything. I shall be managing the final preparations myself. The cook's face split into a smile. Very good, Your Grace. I shall fetch the lists Miss Seymour prepared. The next day and a half were the longest of Leopold's life. He threw himself into the final preparations with a desperation he had not known he possessed. Consulting Margery's meticulous lists, he oversaw the arrangement of flowers in the ballroom. He reviewed the menu with Mrs. Cavendish, approving substitutions where necessary. He ensured the musicians had everything they required. He checked the guest chambers, the wine cellars, the carriage schedule. Every hour he climbed the stairs to Margery's room. Sometimes she was sleeping. Sometimes she was awake but too weak to speak much. He brought her tea, adjusted her pillows, read to her from a book of poetry he found on her single shelf. You should be downstairs, she murmured once, her voice hoarse. The final preparations are progressing well. The ball is tomorrow evening, and everything is in hand. Leopold set the book aside. Dr. Hartwell says you have exhaustion compounded by a fever. You need rest, Margery. Several days of it, minimum. But the ball is progressing. I have it well in hand. She looked at him with something like wonder. You do, don't you? You have learned. I had an excellent teacher. He reached out without thinking, smoothing a damp strand of hair from her forehead. Her skin was still too warm. Rest now. I shall tell you all about the ball tomorrow. Promise? I promise. She closed her eyes. Within moments, her breathing had evened into sleep. Leopold sat there for another moment, watching her. In repose, with fever-flushed cheeks and her hair loose around her shoulders, Margery looked younger, vulnerable. He had never seen her like this, without her armor of efficiency and competence. And he realized with startling clarity that he did not want to see her like this again, did not want her working herself to exhaustion, did not want her living in a tiny room in the servants' wing, did not want her to ever feel invisible again. He wanted more. For her. With her. The thought should have been alarming. Instead, it felt inevitable. The ball the following evening was a success. Guests arrived promptly at 8, their carriages crunching up the drive in a steady stream. The ballroom gleamed with candlelight. The musicians played beautifully. The food was excellent. And Leopold, standing at the head of the receiving line, welcomed each guest with the sort of easy confidence he had learned from watching Margery. Lord Haverton commented on the beautiful arrangements. Lady Ashcroft complimented the menu. Even the normally critical Dowager Duchess of Cavendish admitted the evening was quite acceptable. Cornelius appeared at Leopold's elbow during a break in the dancing. You managed it. With considerable help. Where is Miss Seymour? I have not seen her all evening. Ill resting. Leopold's gaze drifted towards the ballroom doors, as though she might appear at any moment. I have been checking on her hourly. Cornelius's eyebrows rose. Have you now? She exhausted herself preparing for this evening. The least I can do is ensure she recovers. The least you can do, Cornelius repeated slowly. Leo, are you... that is, do you... I find I am far more concerned with Miss Seymour's well-being than I expected, Leopold said quietly, and I am still determining what that means. His cousin was silent for a long moment. Then, she is an exceptional woman. She is. If you hurt her again, I shall not. Leopold met Cornelius's gaze. I swear it. The dancing resumed. Leopold moved through the evening in a daze of responsibility and distraction. He danced with the appropriate young ladies. He spoke with the appropriate gentlemen. He played the role of Duke perfectly, but his mind remained upstairs, in a small room in the East Wing, where a woman with ink-stained fingers and fierce competence lay sleeping. When the last guest finally departed at 3 a.m, Leopold did not retire to his own chambers. He climbed the stairs to Margery's room once more. She was awake, sitting up in bed with a book in her lap. The fever had broken. Her face was pale but no longer flushed. When she saw him in the doorway, she set the book aside. "Your Grace, how was the ball?" "Perfect." He moved into the room, sitting in the chair he had occupied several times that day. The guests were pleased. The food was excellent. Even the Dowager Duchess had no complaints. "That is high praise indeed." A small smile touched her lips. "You managed it without me." "I managed it because of you. Everything I did tonight I learned from you." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I was terrified, if you must know, convinced I would make some terrible error. But I kept thinking, what would Margery do? And somehow, that was enough." She looked away, but not before he saw the shine of tears in her eyes. "You did not need me after all. That is where you are wrong." Leopold reached out, taking her hand before he could question the impulse. Her fingers were small and ink-stained and trembling slightly. "I need you, Margery, not as a governess general or a household manager. I need you, your counsel, your competence, your presence." "Your Grace." Leopold. The name felt strange on his tongue. Intimate. When we are alone, "I wish you to call me Leopold." She stared at him. "That would be highly improper. I do not care about propriety, not anymore." He tightened his grip on her hand. "I care about ensuring you never work yourself to illness again. I care about giving you chambers befitting your position, in the main house, not the servants' wing. I care about—" He stopped, the words catching. "I care about you." The admission hung between them like a confession. Margery's eyes were wide. "You barely noticed me 3 weeks ago." "I was a fool 3 weeks ago. I am trying to be less of one now." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Let me try, Margery. Let me be better. For you, for Westmere, for us. Us," she whispered, "if you will have me." She did not answer immediately. Her gaze searched his face, looking for something. Truth, perhaps, or certainty. Finally, she squeezed his hand. "I shall consider it," she said softly. "Once I am well again." It was not a yes, but it was not a no either. Leopold smiled. "Then I shall ensure you recover swiftly, starting with moving you to proper chambers tomorrow." "Your Grace." "Leopold." Leopold. The name sounded hesitant on her lips, uncertain, but not unwelcome. "You are quite determined, are you not?" "Devastatingly so." And for the first time in 5 years, Margery laughed, a real laugh, bright and genuine and utterly beautiful. Leopold sat with her until she fell asleep, her hand still clasped in his. Outside, dawn was breaking over Westmere Park. 5 days passed before Margery was well enough to leave her chambers. In that time, Leopold supervised her recovery with a devotion that would have been touching if it were not so infuriating. He appeared hourly with tea, broth, books, flowers. He read to her when she was bored. He played chess with her when she was restless. He sat quietly when she needed silence. "You are hovering, Your Grace," she informed him on the 3rd day. "Leopold," he corrected, "and I am not hovering. I am ensuring your recovery. You have an estate to run, which I have been running, quite competently, I might add." He moved her bishop. She was winning as usual. "Mrs. Cavendish says the household has never functioned more smoothly. That is because I prepared everything before falling ill. It is because I finally learned what you have been trying to teach me." He met her gaze across the chessboard. I am not the same man who told you that you were replaceable, Margery. I hope you can see that. She could. It was impossible not to. The Leopold who had dismissed her 3 weeks ago would never have sat at her bedside, would never have learned the names of the servants, or reviewed the household accounts, or personally supervised the spring ball. This Leopold, the one who brought her wildflowers from the garden and remembered how she took her tea, was someone different, someone she was dangerously close to caring for. "Checkmate," she said quietly. Leopold looked down at the board, then laughed. "You were distracting me." "Was I?" Shamelessly. But there was warmth in his voice. Affection. On the 5th day, Dr. Hartwell declared her well enough to resume light duties. Leopold immediately countermanded the order. Light duties? He stood in the doorway of Margery's new chambers, the rose room in the main house with tall windows overlooking the gardens. "She is to rest for another week, minimum." "Your Grace, that is excessive." "Leopold, and it is not excessive. It is necessary." He crossed his arms. "Miss Seymour has been working without respite for 5 years. 1 more week of rest will not destroy Westmere." Dr. Hartwell looked between them, a knowing smile playing at his lips. "Very well, Your Grace. 1 more week of rest. But she may move about the house as she wishes." "Provided she does not overexert herself," Leopold added. "I am standing right here," Margery pointed out. Both men ignored her. When Dr. Hartwell had departed, Leopold turned to Margery with an expression she could not quite decipher. "Walk with me?" "I thought I was to rest. A gentle walk in the gardens qualifies as rest, according to Dr. Hartwell." He offered his arm. "Please." She should refuse, should maintain proper distance. But the gardens were lovely in late spring, and she had been cooped up indoors for days, and Leopold was looking at her with such careful hope that she could not bring herself to say no. "Very well." They walked in silence at first, moving slowly through the rose garden where new blooms were just beginning to open. The air smelled of fresh earth and growing things. Above, birds called to one another in the trees. "I must tell you something," Leopold said finally. "Something I should have told you long ago." Margery's stomach tightened. "You need not." "I do, please." He guided her to a bench beneath a willow tree, sitting beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him through her shawl. "When my father died, I was lost. He had managed Westmere so effortlessly that I assumed it simply ran itself. I did not understand the work required, the constant attention, the care. Your father was a remarkable man. He was, and I was a fool for not learning from him when I had the chance." Leopold's jaw tightened. "But more than that, I was afraid." "Afraid?" "Terrified." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something raw in his expression. Vulnerable. "My father made it look easy. He knew every tenant, every servant, every inch of this estate, and I knew I could never be him, could never live up to what he had built. So I did not try. I told myself the estate would manage, that the servants knew their roles, that I need not involve myself in the tedious details." Understanding dawned. "You were avoiding it, not because you did not care, but because you cared too much. I could not bear to fail him, to prove I was not worthy of Westmere." His voice dropped. "So I treated it all as though it did not matter, including you." Margery's throat tightened. "Leopold, I saw you every day," he continued. "Saw you working until late into the night. Saw you managing crises and solving problems and holding everything together. And I told myself you were simply doing your job, that it was not my concern. But the truth was—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "The truth was, if I acknowledged how much you did, I would have to acknowledge how little I was doing, how thoroughly I was failing." The confession hung between them. Margery had imagined many reasons for Leopold's neglect over the years: arrogance, indifference, even cruelty. But this raw admission of fear and inadequacy, was something she had not expected. "You were not failing," she said quietly. "You were grieving. That does not excuse how I treated you." "No, it does not." She turned to face him fully. but it helps me understand. And understanding. She reached out, touching his hand where it rested on his knee. Understanding is a beginning. Leopold's fingers curled around hers, holding tight. I want to be worthy of you, Margery, worthy of your respect, your trust. He paused, something shifting in his expression. Your affection, if you will grant it. Her breath caught. My affection. I am making a mess of this. He laughed, a short, frustrated sound. I have never been good with words. My father could charm anyone. I merely state facts poorly and offend people. Despite herself, Margery smiled. You are doing better than you think. Am I? He turned towards her, and suddenly they were very close. She could see the gray of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the slight part of his lips. Then let me state one more fact, poorly or not. Leopold, I am in love with you. The world stopped. Margery stared at him, certain she had misheard. You cannot mean that. I can and I do. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I have spent every day since your return learning everything you do, watching you work, seeing how you care for every person in this household, from the Duke to the scullery maid. You are brilliant, Margery, competent and kind and utterly extraordinary, and I have been a blind fool not to see it sooner. You noticed me because I left. She pointed out, though her voice was unsteady. Because the household collapsed without me. That is not love, Your Grace. That is necessity. You are wrong. He cupped her face with his free hand, gentle and sure. I noticed you because you were gone, because Westmere was empty without you. Not just the household, everything. The mornings felt hollow, the evenings felt cold, and I realized I did not want to manage Westmere without you. I did not want to exist without you. Tears stung her eyes. You barely know me. I know you take your tea with milk and no sugar. I know you keep a book of poetry by your bed. I know you worry about Thomas the footman because his mother is ill. I know you hum when you work. I know you have a small scar on your left hand from when you burned yourself lighting the study fire 2 winters ago because the footman forgot. She had not realized he had noticed any of those things, had not thought he paid attention to anything about her beyond her usefulness. I am falling in love with you, Leopold said again, softer this time. Perhaps I have been for weeks and was too stubborn to admit it. But I am admitting it now, and I am asking, his voice cracked, I am asking if you could ever feel the same. Margery closed her eyes. This was foolish, impossible. She was the daughter of a steward. He was a duke. There were rules, expectations, boundaries that could not be crossed. But when she opened her eyes and saw Leopold looking at her with such desperate hope, all those rules felt suddenly meaningless. I do not know, she whispered. I have spent 5 years training myself not to feel anything for you, not to hope, not to imagine. It was safer that way. And now? She drew in a shaky breath. Now I find it is not so simple to stop feeling, even when I should. Hope flared in his eyes. Then do not stop. Let yourself feel, Margery. Let yourself hope. And let me prove that I am worthy of those feelings. You are asking me to trust you. I am begging you to trust me. His forehead touched hers, their breaths mingling in the space between. I know I have not earned it. I know I must prove myself. But give me the chance, please. She should say no. Should protect herself. Should remember that dukes did not marry governess generals, no matter how essential they were to the household. But Margery had spent 5 years being sensible, being cautious, being invisible. She did not want to be invisible anymore. Very well, she whispered. Prove yourself then. Leopold's smile was brilliant. I shall start immediately. And then, with infinite care, he closed the distance between them and kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. His lips were warm against hers, tasting faintly of tea. His hand cradled her face as though she were something precious. Margery had never been kissed before. She had not expected it to feel like this, like coming home. like being seen for the first time. When they finally parted, Leopold's eyes were dark with emotion. "I shall court you properly, with flowers and poetry and whatever else ladies require." "I do not require poetry," Margery said, slightly breathless. "I require respect, partnership, trust." "Then you shall have all three." He pressed another kiss to her forehead, starting with moving the estate office to a location more suited to a partner than a servant. "Leopold, you cannot simply—" "I can, and I shall. You are no longer merely the governess general, Margery. You are." He paused, searching for the right words. "You are the heart of Westmere, and I shall ensure everyone knows it." She wanted to protest, to point out all the reasons this was impossible. But looking at Leopold, at the determination and affection in his eyes, she found she could not. Perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible was not so impossible after all. The sun broke through the clouds above. The garden smelled of roses and new beginnings. And for the first time in 5 years, Margery allowed herself to hope. The scandal broke a week after Margery's recovery. Margery was in the new estate office, a bright, spacious room in the main house overlooking the front drive, when Cornelius Fairfax burst through the door without knocking. "Have you seen the post?" He waved a letter in her direction. "Lady Beatrice Cunningham has taken it upon herself to inform half the county that Leopold is making a fool of himself over a servant." Margery's stomach dropped. "I am not a servant. Try telling that to the gossips." Cornelius threw himself into a chair. Apparently she attended the spring ball and noticed Leopold's absence from the festivities, made inquiries, discovered he was tending to an ill housekeeper, drew her own conclusions. Conclusions that are none of her concern. Conclusions that will ruin you if they gain traction. Cornelius's expression was unusually serious. "Lady Beatrice has wanted Leopold for years. She will not take kindly to being displaced by, forgive me, a woman of no title and modest means." Margery's hands curled into fists on the desk. She had known this was coming, had known that the moment Leopold's attentions became public, the gossip would start. But hearing it stated so plainly still stung. "Where is Leopold?" "Meeting with the estate manager. He does not yet know." Cornelius leaned forward. "Miss Seymour, Margery, I must speak plainly. If you care for Leopold, you should consider stepping back. Lady Beatrice has connections, influence. She can make your life unbearable. By spreading lies? By spreading truths that sound like scandal." Cornelius's voice gentled. "You are a remarkable woman, but the tongue is unforgiving to those who step outside their place. Leopold may not realize the danger he is putting you in, or perhaps he does realize and does not care." Leopold's voice came from the doorway. He entered, his expression thunderous. "Lady Beatrice's letter has just arrived at my desk as well. She was kind enough to send me a copy of her correspondence to various ladies of the county." Margery stood. "Leopold, this is my fault." He moved to the desk, setting down a letter written in an ornate, feminine hand. "I should have anticipated this, should have been more discreet." "Discreet?" Margery's voice rose despite herself. "You wish you had been more discreet?" "That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She could feel anger building in her chest, hot and sharp. This was precisely what she had feared. The moment their connection became public, Leopold would realize the cost, would retreat, would protect his reputation at the expense of hers. "You said you wanted everyone to know I was essential to Westmere, but now that they do know, you wish you had been more careful?" "I wish I had protected you better." Leopold's voice was rough. "This is not your fault, Margery. It is mine. I put you in this position." "No. You put yourself in this position. I was merely foolish enough to believe—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "I should have known better." "Known what?" "That a duke does not court a governess general, no matter what pretty words he speaks." The words hung between them like a blade. Leopold paled. "You cannot believe that." "Can I not?" Margery gestured to Lady Beatrice's letter. The county certainly believes it, and they have made their opinions clear. Hang what the county believes. You are a duke, Leopold. You cannot simply dismiss society's expectations because they inconvenience you. There are rules, boundaries, and I have crossed them by daring to— Her voice broke. By daring to hope. Margery, no. She held up a hand. Let me finish. I have spent my entire life in service. I know my place. I know what is possible and what is not. And a duke marrying a steward's daughter is not possible, no matter how much either of us might wish it. Leopold stared at her. Then slowly, he smiled. What on earth could you possibly find amusing in this situation? Margery demanded. You think I intend to marry you? Her breath caught. That is not— Because I do. Leopold moved around the desk, taking her hands before she could retreat. I intend to marry you, Margery Seymour, with all the proper formalities and public declarations. I intend to make you the Duchess of Westmere, and I intend to do so regardless of what Lady Beatrice Cunningham or anyone else in the county thinks about it. Margery's head spun. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious in my life. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I love you. Not because you manage my household or because you are essential to Westmere, though you are both of those things. I love you because you are brave and brilliant and stubborn and kind. Because you challenge me. Because you make me want to be better. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. The scandal will pass. It always does. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But my love for you will not. I shall court you properly, publicly, and when I have proven to everyone in Derbyshire, including you, that I am worthy of you, I shall ask you to marry me, with a ring and a proper proposal and everything a lady deserves. I am not a lady. You are my lady, and soon you shall be my duchess. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. Unless you intend to refuse me. She should be sensible, should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. But looking at Leopold, at the absolute certainty in his eyes, Margery found she could not imagine saying no. You are quite mad, she whispered. Undoubtedly. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Is that a yes? It is a provisional acceptance, pending your behavior. Leopold laughed, bright and genuine. Then he turned to Cornelius, who had been watching the entire exchange with barely concealed amusement. Cousin, I require your assistance. Oh? I need you to deliver a message to Lady Beatrice Cunningham. Leopold's expression hardened. Inform her that Miss Margery Seymour is under my personal protection. Any further slander against her name will be considered a personal insult to the Duke of Westmere, and I do not take insults lightly. Cornelius's eyebrows rose. You are declaring war on Lady Beatrice? I am declaring my intentions regarding Miss Seymour. If Lady Beatrice chooses to interpret that as war, that is her decision. He glanced at Margery. I shall not allow anyone to harm you. Not socially, not personally, not ever. Something in Margery's chest cracked open. This man, this duke who had barely noticed her 3 weeks ago, was prepared to defy society itself on her behalf. You will lose friends, she said quietly. Allies, invitations. Then they were never truly friends. Leopold's grip on her hand tightened. I would rather be exiled from every drawing room in England than lose you, Margery. Cornelius stood, a genuine smile on his face. Well then, I suppose I shall go deliver this message, and prepare myself for the most entertaining scandal Derbyshire has seen in decades. He paused at the door. For what it is worth, cousin, you are doing the right thing. Miss Seymour is worth 10 of Lady Beatrice. When he had gone, Leopold pulled Margery into his arms. She went without resistance, resting her forehead against his chest. He smelled of soap and leather, and something uniquely him. Are you certain? She asked. Truly certain, because once you declare your intentions publicly, there is no undoing it. I do not wish to undo it. His arms tightened around her. I wish to marry you, Margery, to build a life with you, to run Westmere together, not as duke and servant, but as partners, as equals. The county will talk. Let them talk. We shall give them something to talk about. He pulled back, just far enough to meet her eyes. I have been invisible to society for years. The reclusive duke who avoided balls and rarely left his estate. Let them finally see me. Let them see us. And let them learn that the Duke of Westmere does not require their approval to live his life. Margery felt tears sting her eyes. You are quite extraordinary when you wish to be. I learned from the best. He kissed her then, soft and sure and full of promise. Say yes, Margery. Not provisionally. Say yes and mean it. She thought of 5 years working in the shadows. 5 years being invisible. 5 years believing she would never be more than a useful servant. And then she thought of the past 3 weeks, of Leopold learning her work, of him sitting at her bedside, of him bringing her wildflowers and terrible poetry and absolute, unwavering devotion. Yes, she whispered. I mean it, yes. Leopold's smile was brilliant. Then let us shock the county, Miss Seymour, together. And as he kissed her again, with afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, Margery allowed herself to believe in the impossible. She was going to be a duchess. 3 months later, the wedding was small by ducal standards. Only close family and friends attended. Cornelius, of course, along with a handful of neighboring gentry who had proven themselves true allies rather than fair-weather gossips. Mrs. Cavendish cried through the entire ceremony. Thomas the footman had polished every surface in the chapel until it gleamed. And Leopold, standing at the altar watching Margery walk towards him in a gown of ivory silk, thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. She was not supposed to be nervous. She had told him so firmly that morning. But he could see the slight tremble in her hands as she took his arm. He squeezed gently and she squeezed back. A private reassurance. They had this. Together. The vicar spoke the traditional words. Leopold heard none of them. He was too focused on Margery, on the way the candlelight caught in her hair, on the small smile playing at her lips, on the absolute certainty in her eyes as she said, I do. When it came time for his own vows, Leopold's voice did not waver. I do. And then she was his wife, the Duchess of Westmere. The gasps from the congregation when they kissed were gratifying. The wedding breakfast was held at Westmere, naturally. The household staff had outdone themselves. The dining room was festooned with flowers, the table laden with delicacies. Mrs. Cavendish had prepared Margery's favorite lemon tarts. A toast, Cornelius announced, standing with his glass raised. To the Duke and Duchess of Westmere, may they continue to scandalize Derbyshire for decades to come. Laughter rippled through the room. Leopold caught Margery's eye across the table and she smiled, that private, genuine smile she reserved only for him. Later, when the guests had departed and the house had quieted, Leopold found Margery in the estate office. She was reviewing the household accounts, still in her wedding gown. You are supposed to be resting, he said from the doorway. I am perfectly rested. She did not look up from the ledger. Besides, someone must ensure the household runs smoothly. Leopold crossed the room, gently removing the ledger from her hands and setting it aside. The household will survive one night without supervision, Duchess. Duchess. She tested the word, a slight furrow appearing between her brows. That shall take some adjustment. You have 6 months until the season. Plenty of time to adjust before we descend on London and give the ton something new to gossip about. He pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her waist. Although I confess, I rather prefer having you to myself. Do you? Margery's hand slid up his chest, linking behind his neck. Even though I am a scandalous choice of wife? Especially because you are a scandalous choice. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. You are brilliant and brave and utterly extraordinary, and you are mine. Ours, she corrected. Westmere is ours. The work is ours. The future is ours. Ours, Leopold agreed. Together. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, in the quiet of the office where so much had changed between them. I have something for you, Leopold said finally. A wedding gift. You have already given me far too much. Humor me. He released her long enough to retrieve a small wrapped parcel from his desk drawer, Open it. Margery unwrapped the parcel carefully, revealing a leather-bound book. When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside were sketches, dozens of them. Margery directing the servants. Margery bent over the household accounts. Margery in the gardens, in the kitchens, in the hallways. Each sketch was annotated in Leopold's hand. The heart of Westmere, March 15th, and my partner in all things, April 3rd, and the woman I intend to marry, May 21st. You drew these? Her voice was thick with emotion. I am not particularly skilled, Leopold admitted, but I wanted to capture how I see you, how you have always been, even when I was too blind to notice. Margery traced one of the sketches, herself standing in the estate office, sunlight streaming through the window. I look happy. You are happy. You deserve to be happy. He turned to the final page, where a single line was written in bold script. Irreplaceable. Always. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Leopold, I was wrong, he said quietly, when I said I could replace you in a day. The truth is, I could not replace you in a lifetime. You are irreplaceable, Margery. To Westmere, to me, always. She kissed him then, fierce and certain, the book still clutched in one hand. When they finally parted, both breathless, Margery smiled through her tears. I have something for you as well. Oh? She moved to the desk, withdrawing a small box from the drawer. I have been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside the box was a signet ring, not the ducal seal Leopold wore, but something simpler, a W entwined with an M. Westmere and Margery, she explained. Or Margery and Westmere, whichever you prefer. I thought, we are partners now, in everything, and I wished you to have something to remember that. Leopold slid the ring onto his finger, marveling at how perfectly it fit. I shall wear it always. Even when we argue, especially when we argue, to remind me that I am a fool when I do not listen to you. He pulled her close again, which I shall endeavor not to be. Though I make no promises, I am still learning. We are both learning. Margery rested her head against his chest. But we are learning together. Outside, the moon rose over Westmere Park. The grounds were quiet. The household slept. And in the estate office, the Duke and Duchess of Westmere stood wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of the future they would build together. Leopold thought of that moment nearly a month ago, though it felt like a lifetime, when Margery had set down her keys and walked away, when he had been so certain he could replace her, when he had been so catastrophically wrong. She had been right about everything. The household had collapsed without her. He had been helpless without her. Westmere had been empty without her. But more than that, he had been empty without her. I love you, he said into her hair. In case I have not mentioned it recently. You mentioned it at breakfast, and again during the ceremony, and once more when Cornelius made that terrible toast. But her voice was warm with affection. I suppose one more time will not hurt. I love you, Leopold said again, irreplaceably, immeasurably, infinitely. Margery looked up at him, her eyes shining. I love you too, Leopold, even when you are being impossible. Especially when I am being impossible. Especially then. They kissed again, soft and slow and certain, and when they finally retired to their chambers, the ducal suite, no longer separated by floors and propriety, Leopold fell asleep with Margery in his arms, thinking that he was the luckiest fool in all of England. He had told her he could replace her in a day. Instead, she had replaced his entire world, and he would spend the rest of his life being grateful for it. 9 months later, the anniversary of the Great Resignation, as Cornelius had taken to calling it, arrived with late spring sunshine and a household running like clockwork. Margery stood in the gardens, one hand resting on her gently rounded stomach, watching Leopold direct the planting of a new rose garden. He had taken to spending his mornings outdoors, learning the grounds as thoroughly as he had learned the household management. Your Grace, Mrs. Cavendish called from the terrace. The portrait has arrived. Margery smiled. The portrait, Leopold's gift for their first anniversary. She had protested that it was too extravagant, but he had insisted. The future Duchess of Westmere should be properly documented, he had said, so our children know what a remarkable woman their mother was. Inside the drawing room, the portrait hung above the mantelpiece. Margery in the estate office, surrounded by ledgers and papers, her keys at her waist. But unlike the sketches Leopold had drawn, this portrait showed something more. Confidence, authority, belonging. And at the bottom, in gold letters, was a single word: irreplaceable. Leopold appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What do you think?" "I think you are ridiculously sentimental. I prefer romantically devoted." He kissed her neck. "And accurate. You are irreplaceable after all. I have the ledgers to prove it." Margery laughed, leaning back into his embrace. "How fortunate I am that you finally learned that lesson. How fortunate I am that you gave me the chance to learn it." His hand covered hers on her stomach. "Our daughter shall know it too. I shall tell her every day. Or our son. Or our son." He turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "Whatever the future brings, Margery, I want you to know, you transformed my life. Westmere is better because of you. I am better because of you." "We are better because of each other," she corrected. "That was always the point, Leopold. Partnership, not replacement." "Partnership," he agreed. "Always." And as they stood together beneath the portrait, the Duke and Duchess of Westmere, partners in all things, the household bustled around them, efficient and content. The gardens bloomed, the accounts balanced. The staff laughed. Westmere Park thrived. Because some people, it turned out, truly were irreplaceable, and some love stories began not with a grand gesture, but with a challenge. "I can replace you in a day. Try." The end. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If you enjoyed Leopold and Margery's journey from adversaries to partners to lovers, please leave a comment below. What was your favorite moment? Did you find yourself rooting for them from the beginning, or did they win you over along the way? And remember, you too are irreplaceable. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.